Just to before we like just stage setting before why did I go to Syria? I think a lot of you joined the first meeting we had at the beginning of the year, which when we talked about the liberation of Syria and this new state that we find ourselves in, which we're very excited about. It's a historic moment. It's a moment to be able to visit the country after the fall of a 54-year-old dictatorship and a 13-year-old, almost 14-year-old revolution and war that has destroyed a lot of the country. And so the reason why I wanted to go, and I went with my daughter Alia, who is 19, and my brother Muhammad Ali, who lives in Dubai. He actually was able to go to Syria right after the liberation, and we ended up going, the three of us together, which also made it a very special trip for us as well to do this as a family. I wanted to be able to see this for myself. To be honest, it didn't feel real. And the weird thing is, and this is very common amongst Syrians, that even after I went and I came back, now that I've been here for a week, I still feel like it's not real. And so it's just that really deep belief that we had as Syrians that we would never see this day in our lifetime. And we can, and I think it's going to take a long time to process and a long time to kind of shake that feeling to be like, yes, this is real. We're in a new stage. And it's just a very incredible moment for Syrians. Um, Before we begin the presentation, I mean, I know all of you are very knowledgeable on Syria, but I just wanted to go through a few of the data points just so to set the stage of where we're at for the country. Like I said, it's a 54-year-old dictatorship by the Assad regime, first by the father Hafiz and the son Bashar al-Assad. Over 500,000 people have been killed in the last 13 years, and that's a very conservative number. Some people put that up towards 1 million people between killed in the war, died in the war, as well as the disappeared. Over 120,000 people are still missing, presumed to be at this point dead. We don't know, but that when they went in, when the rebels went into all of the cities and opened up the prisons, there were still 120,000 people that are still unaccounted for in Syria, and the families are still looking for justice and accountability and answers to where their loved ones are. They're still finding mass graves across the country and beginning to figure out, where the people, who these people were, and try to put names to the remains to bring closure to the families. So the whole process of the legal piece and justice and accountability, this is just starting for Syrians, and it will take many, many years to be able to process that part of the tragedy. Over 90% of Syrians live under the poverty line, and this was very, very clear from my visit to see how the people are really suffering. There's very little electricity, very little water. The currency has collapsed. $1 equals around 11,000 Syrian pounds, and everything in Syria is dealt with in cash. So it's a very difficult thing to maneuver. The average salary of a government employee in Syria is $25 a month. The new transitional government is looking to make that 4 times as much, to raise it up to $100 a month, which will be a big change for people. However, this interim government still doesn't have the funds to function as a government, and so people have not received their salaries now. They're going into month 3 without receiving their salaries. So the situation is very desperate, very dire inside Syria. 2.4 million Syrian kids do not have access to school. We're still trying to do a mapping of the schools, but many of the schools are not functional schools. So we're seeing a lot of requests for support and reconstruction of schools. And as you know, in terms of the displaced, there's over 6 million Syrians that are refugees outside of the country, and over 7 million Syrians that are internally displaced. And so the question of the return of Syrians, how can they return? Who can return? What do they return to? Is obviously a big part of what we're interested in as Karam and also as Syrians. So I'll start the presentation to take you through my journey. It's a very difficult thing to explain to people because in the middle of in the course of one day, we were feeling all of the emotions. There were, as I explained to people, there are very, very high highs of being there, and then there's also lows of feeling the reality. And so I tried to actually not, I'm not taking you through a linear journey of like how we moved through Syria, but really batching things within those emotions so you can get an idea of how it was like. So first of all, we traveled from Chicago to Beirut. It was my first time in Lebanon since 2010, and we the next morning we took a car to Damascus, crossed the border, and then we spent 2 days in Damascus. And on the third day, we took a car and traveled up to Aleppo, stopping in Hamas and in Hama, where we visited some relatives in Hama and were able to visit the city of Hamas. We spent about 3.5 days in Aleppo, and then at the end, we actually took a car back and went all the way back to Beirut. And the next day, we traveled back to Chicago. So that was the route that I took on this journey. Traveling to Lebanon was actually very easy, and it was very easy also to cross over the border and go into Syria, which is was also very different. So the first piece is called Arrival to a New Country. So this is the border crossing in Lebanon, and it was okay. The first piece is when we were crossing the border. There is anybody who's crossed the Syrian border. There is no mukhabarat. There is no checkpoints. There is no um, there's no bribes, and it was just basically welcoming to your country, which was a very, very different feeling of anything that I felt before coming in, and that feeling of not having any fear, nothing to hide, showing your Syrian ID, showing your American passport, and everybody just telling you, welcome back to your country. The things that we begin to see inside Syria, and this is from across the country, the new flag is very apparent in the country. Here is this one is from Sham. This is in Hama. I think this is very like also on the left hand side you'll see halawat al-jibn hamwiye. So you'll see a lot of Syrians are celebrating with a specific sweet, and there it's contested whether that's from Hama or from hummus, and so it became like now a joke in the liberation about this halawat al-jibn. And so even on this new mural, they have that there, like saying that it is hamwiye. And this is in the Suq al-Hamidiyya, this grand bazaar in Damascus, and I thought that this was incredible. The new flag as a wedding dress was shown. And then there are a lot of places that have sales that are for the liberation. So this is a 30% off sale because of this of Syria's liberation. You'll also see things like this. This is was in Aleppo, and it says it's the great Syria and not Assad's Syria. And this was unthinkable 2 months ago to have anything like this written anywhere. Literally, this would be the cause of people going to prison and being tortured. This is the Basil al-Assad circle in Aleppo. It used to have Basil al-Assad, the son of Hafiz al-Assad, who was an equestrian on top of this statue, and they brought him down and left the horse alone, which I thought was very fitting as well. And they've also changed the name of the circle. They've changed the names of everything, but I don't know the names of different places. Here's also Sahat Sadal al-Jabri, the main square in Syria, which also shows that the Syrian Revolution is for all Syrians, and it also says that the different countries that supported the killing of Syrians need to apologize and pay reparations to Syrians. We went to a concert in Damascus in a sports arena, and this is you'll see very common, which I thought was very interesting, in that the pictures of Bashar al-Assad and Hafiz al-Assad are being taken down, but you'll see that they're not being taken down completely. He's being cut out, like it's like we're cutting you out of our family photo. But if they took it all down, we would have never known it was there. So I thought that this was so really interesting to see that no, we're going to show you what was there before, but we're still cutting you out. out. It was a really incredible concert by a Syrian American singer named Wasfi Masarani, and it was really beautiful because he sang the revolution songs, and it was attended by the White Helmets, by the Mulhem team, and by about 4,000 Syrians who were coming to sing the revolution songs in openly in public, probably for the first time outside of just protests, and doing that without fear. And here's a little piece of Jannah, Jannah, Jannah. My daughter and I. So this was really a really powerful moment. And that song, Jannah, Jannah, you'll hear it. It means that our country is a paradise, our country is heaven. And that's the sound. It was also, they use the sound of Abdel Basit al-Sarut, who is one of the revolution singers from Hamas and one of Syria's football stars, and also somebody who joined at the end after being displaced from Hamas to Idlib, joined the rebel forces and actually died in battle in 2018. And so his voice is also very prominent in the celebrations as well. So you'll see here the crowds and the new flag and the people celebrating. Another thing that you see when you go into Syria, this is inside of Damascus when after we entered Damascus, and the solar panels. It's across all of the country on all of the buildings. It really changed the landmark of the cities, and this is how people are actually able to get electricity now inside of Syria by installing these really massive solar panel systems on top of the buildings, and you see that in all across the country. The next part is, I'm called this tourists in our own homeland. So here's, you're going to get the highs of our trip, of the kinds of places we visited, and really like feeling like we are tourists and visiting like the sites in Damascus and Aleppo and in Homs, and seeing the different parts of like the landmarks of Syria. So we stayed in a hotel in the old city of Damascus in Bab Touma called Beit El Wali, and it's a series of different Arabic homes that's renovated and created into a really beautiful hotel. This is parts of the streets in old city of Damascus in Bab Touma. And you'll see also a Nizar al-Qabbani poem in the area. And this is the Umayyad Mosque, the Great Mosque of Damascus, which was just an incredible experience. Central Damascus is very different from the rest of Syria. It's untouched by war, and so you are able to go and see all of the things that existed at really untouched, and really feel the celebration of the people in liberation at the same time, really not being affected physically by the war, but of course still affected economically. These are all in the Umayyad Mosque. This is Sahat al-Marjan, Damascus, which is a central square, and this was being used as a place for people to put in posters and flyers about the people that have been disappeared, or people that they know have been released from prison and they still can't find them, and saying we're looking for these missing people. So that was also a very moving moment. This is the top of the Qasyun, Mount Qasyun at the top of Damascus. We were able to go and have a tea. This was an area that was restricted for Syrians to visit during the revolution because it's higher than the presidential palace, and so they restricted Syrians from going up here for many, many years to protect Bashar al-Assad's palace. And this is my brother and my daughter and I in front of Suq al-Hamidiyya, the Grand Bazaar in Damascus. We were able to go to Homs and visit the famous clock tower in central Homs, and also in Hama to visit the water wheels that were very famous as well. They're very famous and ancient as well. They aren't functional right now because the Asi River is very low, but I don't know if that's going to change with with the different figuring out what the water situation. And this is the Kehlani area in Hama, which was what part of old Hama, and the behind this is the area that was completely destroyed by Hafiz al-Assad in 1982, in February 1982, when there was the Hama massacre, which took the lives of at least 20,000 people within 1 month and destroyed a huge part of the old city of Hama. And this is kind of like all that's left of that old city, called the Kehlani. This is actually my mother-in-law's home in Hama where she grew up, and you can see the citrus fruits and trees everywhere in Syria filled with like lemons, oranges, grapefruits, and this is a very special Syrian fruit called kabad, which is made into different kinds of sweets, used like cooked into different kinds of sweets. And you see the traditional streets inside Aleppo that are very beautiful. We were able to go to the citadel, which a lot of people are visiting now from all across Syria. And you can see across from the citadel pieces of destruction. So very close to the citadel, which was a fault line between eastern and western Aleppo, and the destruction there. And the traditional smaller streets in Aleppo, old city of Aleppo. This is Knisset Latin, one of the very big churches in Aleppo, in the Aziziyeh area, a predominantly Christian area inside Syria, inside Aleppo. And some of the very, like the beautiful facades of Aleppo. And this is also the old clock tower in Aleppo, Bab al-Faraj. This is called Villa Rose, which is a very famous pink house in Aleppo in front of the public park. And this is actually where I used to buy all of my cassettes. So I'm aging myself here. It's called Queen, and it's still there, but it's closed. But I spent a lot of my childhood, my teenage years here trying to go and buy the latest music in the 90s, and all of them on cassette and then later on CDs. And this is the University of Aleppo, the Faculty of Architecture, where I studied. And this was also a site of a bombing about in 2014, which they were just able to now, about over 80 people were killed in a bombing in January, I think 2014, that was never claimed by the regime, that they actually just were able last week to have a memorial for in this area, in this square in front of the school, with people, survivors and victims' families coming and talking about their experiences for the first time, because that bombing happened, it was never claimed by the regime and nobody ever talked about it. So they're just starting to be able to speak about the things that happened to them during this war. These are very special sweets that we found on the streets of Aleppo. This one is a kind of a spicy meringue cake that my brother did not let me take and eat because it was what was open and people are touching it in the open air. But I had to take a picture of it because I have a lot of memories with these kinds of sweets. And we were able to have a cocktail, which is like a smoothie at our friend's place. He's still here, one of the famous people in Aleppo who makes the smoothies. And he was just so happy that people are coming back and he's able to serve people again and feel that joy and making his famous smoothies and his cheese sandwiches. One of the most moving parts about going back is going home. I also know that many of you know how much I'm attached to Aleppo and attached to my home. So this is when we got in a taxi, we took the ride to Aleppo and we took the taxi, and this is the road to my home in Al Shahba, which is in western Aleppo. And so this is the first time I've been going on this route.
It feels like a dream. And I don't think that it's real.
So that was very much a very surreal moment. I dreamt about this day for many years, and I really never believed that we would get here. My brother stops the taxi a little bit early because he wanted me to go the rest of the route by foot. And I was really, really crying really hard the whole time. This is in front of our house where I grew up in Aleppo. And inside the house, we found pictures from my grandmother's house. This is a picture of my father and his sisters and his aunt, a photo that we grew up with for as long as I remember. And I can't show you more pictures of our house because we are doing a renovation because my family will be going back. So hopefully I'll be able to share pictures in the summer after the house is completed. We also were able to stop in front of my grandmother's house. My grandmother came here to the United States after the war began in 2013 and died in Michigan. So she's buried in Michigan, but that top level balcony is the home that we grew up in and my father grew up in, and this is my daughter in front of that house in the Sabil area. And here is the intercom for her house, and you can even see the second name on the right from the top is Muhammad Sergie, which is my grandfather who lived here. So they haven't even changed the name at the door, even though the house has been sold. And this is my great grandmother's house in front of Sahat Sadallah Jabri. I don't know this house, but we always, when we pass by, say, this is Anne's house. My Turkish great grandmother lived in this home when she moved to Aleppo, like a very, very long time ago. And so my grandmother actually lived here as well. And we were able to go even further than that to Bab Nisreen, which is where my great great grandfather's home is from Aleppo. And this is one of the 8 gates of Aleppo, Bab Nisreen, that dates back to 1252. And our family home is in this neighborhood. So really a reclaiming of home on multiple generations, multiple places. And the interesting thing about Syria and their ID cards is that, and I brought this, here it is, even on my ID card, my Syrian ID card that I have from the 90s, I think is the last time when they renewed these. On the back of it, it says that I am from Bab Nisreen. So they take you back to like where the oldest origin of where you're from, even though like I never lived here, my father never lived here, even my grandfather probably didn't live here. They really put you back, your origins is on your ID. And that's Hadia in front of that gate as well. So now we're going into really part of the presentation that is very sad. The idea that the most of Syria has been destroyed, and I'll show you a lot of images of the destruction. The destruction is very similar, and it's also very different in the way that it affected different cities. We spent an afternoon going around in towns outside of Damascus, and this is really, like, if you know Damascus, this is crossing a street and then suddenly you're in the outskirts of Damascus. So this is probably 10 minutes from the central Damascus, those areas that I was showing you earlier with the hotel and the old city. This is the town of Dareya. It's been completely flattened. This is one of the towns that joined the uprising at the beginning of 2011, the hometown of Ghiyas Matar, a young man who believed in nonviolence. Him and his friend from the Shurbaji family believed that if they gave the regime soldiers water and roses, that they would be able to convince the soldiers not to kill their countrymen who were who were coming out in peaceful protests. He was tortured to death with his body returned to his family in 2011, and it was a really big loss for the revolution. This is the town that he's from, the town that believed in nonviolence, this is what the Assad regime left it in. This area is called Mukhayyam al-Yarmouk, and this area was mostly occupied by Palestinian refugees who've lived for decades inside Damascus. And here you'll see how this area was under siege and also destroyed, and you'll see how it was destroyed in a really horrific way. And you'll see this echoed in the destruction across Syria, where the buildings were not just destroyed by airstrikes, by barrel bombs, by chemical weapons, and whatever they did to destroy areas. They were destroyed and then taken apart. So if you don't know Syria, even for me coming in, you would think like, oh, was this country all under construction and then went into a war and got bombed? Because what it looks like is unfinished buildings, buildings that don't even have like windows, don't have doors, don't have tiles, don't, to the point of even the iron rods were stolen out of the concrete. So it was destroyed, and then it was people came in, militias came in, groups came in, and took these built structures apart and left it so that there is no way for people to return. So because if you just bombed a building, people will come back and figure out how to come back in. But they bombed it and made it so that people could never return. And we're talking towns and villages and complete areas all across Syria is like this. Here you can see at the top that people are coming back and starting to rebuild, just putting some concrete blocks. And there were two little children waving at us, and so you can begin to see portions of life, but very, very little, and it's very difficult. This is an area called Jobar outside of Damascus, and here you can see like the destruction at this scale. Here you can see saying Jobar, from underneath the rubble, we're coming back to rebuild. So you also start seeing markings of people saying we're coming back. Again, here in the middle of the building, you can see somebody came back in and tried to salvage and to live in this building. And I took some videos, which you can see, which shows you how it's just like the destruction is endless. You just keep going through, and it's very hard to watch. This is the taxi driver saying, like, inside there's even much more destruction. This is in Homs the Khaldiyeh. This is what we saw, the white helmets at work trying to clean up also around. This is right near the great mosque of Khalid ibn al-Walid, and the Khaldiyeh area, which also central Homs is completely destroyed. This is in Aleppo, right out the outskirts of the citadel when you're going into eastern Aleppo, and you can see the level of the destruction in Aleppo as well. And this is what I was talking about, of just seeing this idea of it looks like everything was unfinished, but that's not true. Buildings were completely done, and it was very vibrant and also very crowded, and this is what's left. So I mean, it really is a case of domicide. That really, what that was, the destruction that happened by the regime. And this is what we start looking at when we think about how are people going to return, what are they going to return to, what will it take to rebuild Syria. This is right outside of the citadel. This is a very old hammam Yalbugha, that was also destroyed in the war. And this is also right outside the citadel. So I wanted to, before I end, I wanted to talk about specifically an area in Aleppo that I felt was, destroyed, and also the idea of the rebuilding efforts that were being done by the regime, that were being supported by different international organizations, that were, like, I think are a very bad example of like how to rebuild, and actually added on to the destruction of the cultural destruction of the city. To start with, these are Baathist buildings that were built in the 80s. And I actually wrote a lot of papers about this while I was studying architecture in the early 2000s. And you have to imagine that these buildings were built on the destruction of the old city of Aleppo. And even now, these buildings got destroyed. But this was something that, if you remember what I talked about in Hama, this is something that Hafiz al-Assad did in addition to killing people and disappearing people and torturing people. There was a lot of destruction of the old heritage of Aleppo specifically, and also Hama. This is one example. And so I'm seeing that in the reconstruction, that the efforts that have just been done in the past 10 years in Aleppo, similar instincts. So here you can see some of the really old architecture of Aleppo destroyed. This is an old French building from the 1920s that's right in front of the citadel that has been completely destroyed. It used to be one of the most beautiful cities, beautiful buildings outside of the citadel. And this is an area called Sahat
ساحة
al-Hatab.
الحطب,
And you can just see how
January
the
9,
reconstruction, it's a lot of
2025.
new stone, white stone, and kind of an erasure of what existed before. To the point is people, even people who know this area very, very well, when I was sending them these videos, they were like, they didn't even know where we were. And so when I went to the old bazaar of Aleppo, the souk, I was so disoriented because a lot of parts of the bazaar have been completely destroyed, and a lot of the different architecture, like this here, is beyond, you don't even recognize where you are. And so here are some
It's very
videos.
hard to walk in places that you knew so well, and I don't really know where I am right now, and I don't even know what existed before. And you just think about what's happened here and what's left and how you're going to rebuild. It's just so heartbreaking to witness so much loss, destruction, like you just don't see.
Here even you can see how it's being rebuilt.
January 2025.
No regard to architectural rehabilitation, no regard to how to rebuild something that's ancient. And so for me, it was very hard to be in this area because I didn't even know where I was. And I kept on telling my daughter, like, no, we have to go from here. No, we have to go from there. And what I knew didn't exist anymore. Here you can see parts of the old souk that's similar to what was there before. But then here you can see what was rebuilt. And anybody can see how it was without any regard or cultural sensitivity. Areas of the destruction, and then this area that was rebuilt. And you can also see this here outside of the souk of more
The
destruction.
citadel is right there, and then you can see all of the destruction to the old market, and it's very disorienting because you don't really know where you are. Haysu Sa'atiye is in front of us, and a lot of life and markets in between the destruction. Aleppo, January 11, 2025.
This is what I thought was interesting because here you can see they're using I saw them using a lot of the UN tent tarp, and also you see the solar panels. And so it's like when you're thinking about rebuilding, the materials people are using, how they're rebuilding, the solar panels now becoming part of like the architectural landscape, and how do you actually, process all of that when you're talking about, one of the oldest areas in the entire like world, one of the oldest cities in the world, and how do you process all of these pieces together of what people's needs will be, in addition to like the cultural and architectural preservation of this city. And here are some just more images.
The Umayyad
The
Mosque in
heartbreaking
Aleppo
part is really the Umayyad
is
Mosque,
still under renovation.
and
If you want to call
this
it a
is what they
renovation
call
or
it.
reconstruction. It looks brand new. I have no idea what the deal is with this specific project, because this does not look like the Umayyad Mosque I knew, but it's still under construction. You can't go inside. That's the minaret, the rebuilding of the old minaret. And here you can see the front courtyard. We can't go inside.
So yeah, this is the old mosque, a grand mosque of Aleppo, Aleppo's Umayyad Mosque. The minaret was destroyed during the war, and this is the rebuilding of it. So imagine go back to like the Damascus Umayyad Mosque and this similar timelines of existence, and the rebuilding is just like it looks like it's something that's just brand new. Um, and I think that it's a monstrosity, and I don't understand what happened here and how they decided to do this, but I don't know also what would fix this. But it's one of like this is one moment in Syria that the attempt to rebuild was not done in the right way. Before I close and to open it up for Q&A, yes, there is hope at the end of our trip. This is one of my favorite moments in the trip. This is right near the Umayyad Mosque, the Grand Mosque in Aleppo, and we found this. The people are using the images of Bashar al-Assad as doormats, and he allowed me to step on the door on him, and we all were laughing. And he was like, "Do it again, do it again." And I just thought that was like the best thing ever. You'll see these moments happening all across Syria, this joy and jubilation of being done with the tyrant. And I think that people are going to be celebrating this for a very long time. You see the word Hurriye, freedom, really all across all the places we went. And so this was one that was in Aleppo, and the person who wrote this just did this multiple times along this massive wall, just writing freedom, 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 freedom. And I was very moved by that. We were able to have two board members like meet board member meetups. So this is Anna Nolan on the left with James Sadri, who's in green. They're from the Syria campaign, people that I've worked with forever. They came to visit Aleppo and visit Syria after working on Syria for so long. And Anna's on the Karam board. So we had a dinner in Aleppo, and Rasha Mansouri with her husband Hassan. I was able to see them for a night in Damascus. Rasha is our board chair, and she was able to travel to Aleppo to visit her family, and we were able to connect. We also have several other board members. Omar Salim and Razan Masarani are going to be traveling the next couple of weeks, and Firas, who's the country manager of Karam Evi, was able to travel right after the liberation and to northern Syria for the first time. So we are having a lot of people from Karam joining in, visiting. Most of these are personal trips that we took, but at the same time starting to think about how we're going to function inside Syria. This is on the way out back to Lebanon. I took a picture of this so that we can keep this. I don't think this will exist much longer, but this is one of the old, signs that says "قائدنا إلى الأبد الأمين حافظ الأسد," our leader forever, Hafiz al-Assad. These kinds of statements that were, really grinded into our brains as children in Syria. This is going to all not exist anymore soon. So I wanted to preserve that. It also reminds me of the reason why we have in Karam the 10,000 leader project is because of this sentence, because there is no one leader and there is no one leader forever, which now the Syrian people have proven. And our mission was to build 10,000 leaders to replace the one leader. And this mission has become even more relevant than ever because there is a space for all of these young people to lead and take on responsibilities and to rebuild and to do all of the things that they dreamt of doing as they were refugees inside Syria if they choose. And this is our last image before leaving, my brother leaving to Dubai and us leaving to the United States after our last night in Beirut. And finally, all across Syria, in the small shops, I kept on seeing these Ferouz coffee cups mentioning her song, Fi Amal, Fi Amal, yes, there is hope. And that I think this is kind of like what I left Syria with and what we're working on now with that, with the idea that it is going to be very, very hard. It's a big journey ahead, but we have a lot of hope. And that's my trip. We can open it up to Q&A, and I just wanted to kind of say, as we line up any questions, I wanted to say that right now, and you'll be updated. We're planning on making sure everybody's updated in our newsletters, probably doing more of these kinds of Zooms as needed. But and please reach out to us if you have any specific questions. But just very quickly, Right now, we are working on our legal status inside Syria. How do we register Karam as an organization, association inside Syria? And how do we actually start bringing our programs into Syria now? We will be having programming during Ramadan, which is in about 5 weeks. And if not, being able to support other pieces before that. And we're trying to work as fast as we can. On the other hand, all of you know this, you're all Karam supporters. It's really important to know that the return is very, very, very slow. We're watching all of the people that we serve inside Syria, our families, our students, our scholars, and keeping very close contact with them to see who's deciding to leave and who's not, and to adjust our programming as we go along. But watching how slow return is probably going to be, we're looking at operations in Turkey as normal for the next year at least, if not longer, because we were not going to leave the people that we've been serving behind, and we're going to continue to serve the scholars that we have to finish their universities, the families that we support, while we're building out our work inside Syria, and we'll keep you posted on all of that. So now I can move to the Q&A. And actually, before we go to that, I know Noor has a video. One of the camp that the Hilal camp that we support inside Turkey, the one that was built after the earthquake. The kids have been off this week from school, and I just wanted to show you how we just got this video this morning, and we wanted to share it with all of the kids in the camp. Thank you, Noor. So yes, I'm just reading through your messages. If anybody has any questions, I'm seeing from Heather, we ran into a lot of people we knew, especially at that concert. The Mulham team were kind enough to put us all in a section that we all knew each other. So I actually saw Ra'ed Saleh, the head of the White Helmets. I saw Fadl Abdel Ghani, the head of the Syrian Human Rights Watch. I saw a lot of the people from the White Helmets. I saw Kinan Rahmani, our friend from here with his wife Noor. I saw people from the Mulham team, Ahmed Salini, who's somebody who came and joined one of our missions and is one of my brother's best friends from childhood. I saw a lot of people, and that was really exciting. I also saw some neighbors in Aleppo. I had lunch at one of my neighbors. And so it was really, really nice to see. It was very easy to cross the border, and I did have my Syrian ID and my American passport. They are letting also Americans coming in. It's much easier if you have a Syrian ID, and I think these are like they're figuring this out as they go along. But it was very easy for me to go. Mahmoud, yes, definitely. I'm going to be coming back to Aleppo soon. Um, Okay, May, what will your focus be in Syria? So we want to bring the programs that we've learned to do in Turkey, specifically Karam Studios. We know that these programs are they're inspirational and they're life-changing for teenagers. We also know that the need right now in Syria for the basics is very, very high. So we're seeing how we're going to implement our programs while we are starting to do specific programs that have to do or projects that have to do with reconstruction of schools, with providing the basic necessities for people, because the people are they're very much in need of food, of basic supplies, basic education. So we're going to see, like, we're kind of going back a little bit into emergency mode, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're thinking about the long term, because we're thinking about our work now. Our work now is now nation building, and it is the long term. This is kind of the dream that we've had, that if we could function in Syria, what would we do? So we're really good at being flexible and doing emergency as long as we need to, but we're also very aware that we don't want to do it longer than we need to before international agencies come in and are able to provide the basics. And then we can actually really focus on the specialty that we've built over the past 10 years in Turkey, which is to deliver innovative education. Um, Zahra, did you meet many people who returned to Syria and there's not the infrastructure present? I didn't meet people personally, but we are hearing that as a concern from our families of there is nothing for them to return to. And that is a reality. Right now in Turkey, we have a few families that were returned, and Turkey is making it a little bit easier for people. First of all, you don't have to return if you don't want to. It's a choice, and they're making it now. Before it used to be if you want in to return, then you couldn't come back. They're creating a system where people can go look and see for 3 times before they decide, which I think is very, very important. I think the return of refugees is really important for people to think about, that there's a lot of people that cannot return to Syria in its present form. And how do we actually think about that, especially now that we have a new administration here in the United States? We're going to hear a lot of rhetoric from Europe, I'm sure, about people being forced to return because they're no longer refugees and they don't have no longer have the fears of being in their country. That on one level is true, but they can't go back unless they have something to go back to. And right now, with all of the sanctions that are on Syria, which we're trying to also take off of the new Syrian government, so that they're able to start rebuilding and be able to bring in the investment money that can allow people to return. These are all things that have to happen at the same time to create a situation for people to return to. I wanted to tell one story. I forgot to say this when I was talking about Damascus. Is our taxi driver who was taking us around our areas that were destroyed. One of the things that I noticed when I was going around is that we saw a lot of fruit vendors. One of the crimes of this regime, and it's also a repetition of what Hafiz al-Assad did in the 80s, I lived through this, is that bananas, for instance, were a dream for Syrians because they just stop bringing in certain products, and those products become something that people don't know. There were no bananas in Syria, and after liberation, suddenly they opened it up, and now there are all the different kinds of fruits inside Syria, and you can see them on all of the fruit vendors, and it's really, really incredible because all the kids now are eating bananas. Some of them are eating bananas for the first time in their lives. And so the taxi driver was saying that my child, who's 4 years old, was telling me that I want you to buy me a little tree. I want to buy a little tree. And he kept on asking, like, what do you mean this little tree? And he said, I want you to buy me the little tree that looks like it's a palm tree, but it's very little. And he didn't understand what it was. And so once they were walking past one of these fruit vendors, and he pointed to it, and he was talking about a pineapple, because the child didn't even know, he'd never knew what a pineapple was, and he started seeing that for sale, and the driver told me I didn't care how much it was going to cost. It was expensive, but I had to buy my son a pineapple because I want him to taste it. And he opened up the pineapple for him, and he was like, well, this is too sour, I didn't like it. And he told him that they thought that the kiwi was potatoes. But the really beautiful part is that the kids are seeing this, and knowing that all of these kids are growing up in a place like Assad is now history. All of this is history. They're going to say this used to be what it was like. And for me, I never imagined that that was going to be a reality in my country. So these are parts of where we can find the hope, where we can find that it's turning the page. And I think it's going to take a long time for Syrians to process and to be able to actually say that this really is the past. But it is the past, and we're in that tomorrow that we didn't think we were going to get to. And so I'm very, very excited about the next stage of our work, the next stage of the country, the idea of rebuilding. And I'm very, very grateful to you all for being on this journey, because we took you on a very, like, a horrible time throughout the last 14 years of seeing all of the sad stories. And it's just for me something where we're going to be able to share really incredible stories, and show you what we're able to do inside the country. And hopefully you will all be able to visit Syria yourselves. So I wanted to share all of this information with you as quickly as we could, and we hope that this will be one of many. And if there is anything that you would like to see from us, or questions you would like to see us answer, reach out to us.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here and sharing those moments with Lina. We appreciate your time, your effort, your donation, your support always. And as Lina said, if there's anything you'd like to know more of, you want to hear more stories, please reach out. And thank you. Hope you all have a wonderful day.